Now, if you're not ready, then go ahead and tell me you're not ready.
I object to you getting records. You've been intrusive into people's personal lives.
I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer, but
the Debrief.
Hello and welcome to another episode of I'm Not a Lawyer, But the Debrief. I am Melanie, aka I'm Not a Lawyer, But, and I am refilming this at the house, so it's a little more casual than my typical episodes. My co-host, aka my husband, aka Gooseby, is somewhere in my house with my children. So you'll get me, but I also have some guests joining today, so I'm very excited about that. And before we get into the guests and what we're going to talk about with the guests, it's only right that we start with the fact that Karen Reed, the trial for Karen Reed has concluded finally after what we had the first trial, hung jury, chaos between the first and the second trial. Everything you can imagine happened. The second trial starts, 8 or so weeks of it? And then we finally get to a conclusion, which is that Karen Reed was found not guilty of basically killing John O'Keefe. What she was found guilty of was driving intoxicated, essentially. It was like a DUI. Actually, I have an attorney here. So before I misstate stuff, Stara, I just told you I was going to leave you down, but I'm going to bring you back up. So that in case I say anything wrong, you can correct me. She was essentially found guilty of a DUI, correct?
Yeah. Got a year of probation? I think.
A year of probation. Is that not absurd in the sense of how much money was spent on this case? In your opinion?
It's a weird situation where if she had been found guilty of nothing, that would almost be more weird than this.
Yeah. Okay.
Or less weird. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I did a video about this. I understand, the defense putting that in there was smart. Once you heard the jury talk afterwards, it wouldn't have mattered because I think we thought maybe there might be more of a split. But them putting that in, if they hadn't put that in, she would have walked on everything. It's kind of like a funny situation. But I think that we thought that was a wise move. If there were some people that were unsure on, I mean, the murder charge was just never going to happen. But if there were some people that were maybe on the manslaughter, that they would ultimately argue this to compromise. Once you heard the jury speak, it's clear that that was never going to happen.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So you've been watching some of the jury interviews and things that they've been having?
I started out watching it and then it became overwhelming because they're all speaking. I mean, not all. How many of them have talked? What, 4 or 5, I think? But
I've only seen 3. I didn't know it was that many.
I might be exaggerating. But it's hard to keep track because they've all talked to different people. And so initially I was oh, I'll follow this. This will be interesting because it's always cool to hear juror perspectives. But then it became holy F. I don't have a day job, so I can't keep up. But I mean, I think what was abundantly clear is that at least the jurors who have spoke, there was no universe in which they were ever going to get to a guilty on the higher charges. So it makes sense that at the beginning, the defense was well, let's put this in. But in retrospect, it's man, she would. That was never going to be an issue, But defense tends to request the lessers. So,
and you've mentioned, I feel like you have before on this podcast even mentioned the phrase of splitting the baby. Can you just, for the context for the people who are not lawyers, just talk a little bit about what that is, or what you mean when you say that?
It's kind of unique here. So do you want me to talk about it here or more broadly? Because here it's a little different than you normally think about it. In this particular.
Do both if you don't mind.
Yeah. I mean, split the baby. Let's say that you've got murder is your primary charge, right? And that's all. In Texas, we would only go for it on one indictment, right? So the defense would maybe request manslaughter in that scenario because to the extent that you suspect that most of the jurors are going to think, my client did something.
Mhm.
You want to include the manslaughter because it has like a lower punishment range and whatever else. Because if you just go forward on murder, then they may convict on murder. But if you put that manslaughter as an open opportunity, some people may be like, well, to the extent there's a few things I'm weak on, I'll go with manslaughter, you know?
Uh-huh.
In the Karen Reed situation, it's very different because like the way, I mean, I knew why they put it in there, but I think it was because, you know, like we saw the last jury, they were like 9-3 on manslaughter. And
Mhm.
so you have to go in at least thinking it's a possibility that some of those jurors are going to really be, you know, considering convicting on at least that. And the DWI, I guess OUI is what they call it in Massachusetts,
Mhm.
allows your jurors that are like, well, okay, but you're not really sure, but you're sure on the OUI. You know,
Mm.
it gives them something to argue to the people that were less convinced.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. No, it makes sense. So interesting. And at first I was like, why would they do that makes no sense. But after understanding it was the defense who put that in, it was like, oh, I completely, I
Yeah.
get it. I get it.
Well, and what was funny was there was sorry to interrupt you. There was a
Oh.
question that was like, well, what time? Because there's really 2 time periods that are at
Yeah.
play here. And I mean, I kind of thought about that. Like when I was listening to Brennan argue, I was like, you know, there's really 2 time frames. And to me, that sort of benefits the defense too. You know, like it's like, look, we don't even know if she was DWI because like, you know, the blood test and stuff was taken so
Yeah.
many hours later. I
Yeah.
think that like Karen's interviews kind of hurt her in that respect, but
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is. I am very happy that that trial is over. It felt like what a journey that we all have been on. But I'm also happy that because it you know, my opinion is that the prosecutors did not do their job in proving that she did this. There were just so many questions, so many things left unanswered. And so to arrive at this verdict felt like it was appropriate and
it
right.
needed to happen. Like there were so many people because I kind of thought it would be hung, you know, like that was really kind of where I was at.
Uh-huh.
But this needed finality. Like the idea of trying this a third time is absurd. You know,
Yeah.
like at some point you have to accept that you can't meet your burden of proof.
Yeah. 100%. Okay, so I wanted to start there. I brought you up early. Appreciate you just jumping into the conversation. But we have some other folks joining us today. And this next attorney that I'll pull up is someone I think is the last attorney we had on the show and got a lot of positive feedback about her.
What a surprise. All of my feedback was negative.
Wow. Fitting.
Do you want to reintroduce yourselves to the audience? I'm sure they know who you are at this point.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Hallie Bezner. I am an attorney. My tongue is red because I just drank fruit punch. And I'm eating cherries. I am an attorney in Chicago area. I practice in state and federal court in Illinois.
And
Love
Hallie
it.
and I have known each other for like 15 years or something.
We have.
I was going to say, because you've been on the pod so many times, Stara, I didn't even do a proper introduction. I just brought you up. But do you want to do another introduction in case we have some new viewers to the podcast? Maybe it's appropriate for you to also say who you are.
I am attorney Stara. That's my name on TikTok. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Texas. I only practice in state court. I don't do federal cases, but I can read, so I think I have some insight here.
I love it.
It's fun.
And we have one more attorney that will be joining us. So I'll briefly kind of get into it, but once she comes on, then we'll stop to make sure she does an intro as well. So thank you guys for joining, especially with my last minute reach out. But it's been a lot happening in the Diddy case. While Karen Reed is happening, Diddy has also been happening. And I thought it would be good because we are very close to closing arguments. They are supposed to begin tomorrow. Today is Wednesday. I'm going to put this on YouTube after we record. So we're recording on Wednesday. Closing arguments are scheduled to begin Thursday. But in advance of that, there's been a lot of things happening. And I thought it would be good to kind of get insight on that. So first of all, let's start with the fact that the defense called no witnesses. And a lot of people who are not lawyers were very shocked by that. Why wouldn't he defend himself? How come he's not taking the stand? What is happening? And as defense attorneys, I'm sure you guys have really good insight into that. And so let's start with Stara. Do you want to give some thoughts and opinions that can kind of settle people as to why this was a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think a common misconception because of like the cases that get the most media attention is that the defense tends to put on a case through their own witnesses, when really it's considerably more common to put on your case and your theory through cross-examination of the prosecution's witnesses. So this falls perfectly in line with that. And it makes sense to me with the allegations because the defense was able to do so much with these witnesses to kind of undermine things, because really kind of the biggest issue in this case is like, what is everybody's motivation and how voluntary was any of this, right? And they were able to produce, I think, the best evidence that they would be able to, that, you know, people were making choices to be a part of these things. So, you know, I think people overestimate how important it would necessarily be to put on your own witnesses. It really kind of depends. And for Diddy to testify would be not the choice I would probably advise him to make, because at the end of the day, whatever you think, even if you don't think that the feds have proved their indictment here, I don't think anybody thinks he's like a great guy. So that would be sort of the broad overview.
Got it. Hallie, anything to add on that?
I mean, you know, I totally agree. My question when people say that is always like, what evidence do you think they should have presented? You know, like Karen Reed was totally different because they had experts that could give opinions. Like, was Diddy gonna call an expert to be like, freak offs are good? Like, no such expert exists as far as I know. You know, like, what would you put on the stand? And like, I mean, generally, not the rule, but like my rule is I'm never putting my client on the stand unless there is something that only they can say. So if there's a situation where my client is involved in a shootout in a dark alley with no video cameras and no witnesses, then nobody other than my client could testify as to what happened in that alley. But if there are witnesses, I'm going to put the witnesses on. So what is Diddy going to say? That the only time I generally would put a client on is if there is some sort of like affirmative defense that you're trying to prove. So self-defense, duress, you know, anything like that, then you would have your client testify. But I mean, their defense is, it's not a RICO. He didn't do these things. What, you know, you're going to put him on the stand to be like, no, it's not a RICO. Like, that's not
I mean, helpful. Like, really, what is he going to say? No, they all wanted it.
Yeah.
How compelling is that going to be from his mouth?
Yeah. And just because you mentioned affirmative defense, and then you kind of mentioned like self-defense, in my brain, affirmative defense means, yes, this happened, I did it, but here's why. Is that what that breaks down to? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, I did this thing that would be otherwise illegal, but for.
Okay.
Like self-defense, you're saying you have to like effectively put on self-defense. You can do two things at once, but that doesn't usually work out. I shot this guy, but it's because he did this to me, and that made me fearful, right? Yeah. Really, it's very hard to make a case that you felt fearful through other people. It can be done.
Yeah.
But usually doesn't work.
Yeah. Oh, one of the things that people were mentioning, I went to New York, and one of the things that people who were attending the trial were, because Diddy apparently testified in his previous case. So people were saying, they were like, there's a chance he could, but to the point you guys are making, this is a different situation. But also people were saying, maybe he's a narcissist and he believes that he can.
Well, that's literally just what I was about to say, which is that like I'm going to go ahead and say he is a narcissist. I feel like there's not much maybe there. But like some clients, I mean, ultimately that's a client decision, and you can tell them all day, this is the worst idea that you've ever had, but they don't always listen. And when it's somebody who's used to controlling situations and is such a strong personality, you know, Diddy
Mhm.
might be one to fall in that trap, but why are you spending $50 billion on all these lawyers if you're not going to listen to their advice?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and also like the prior trial was a shooting. So again, like it makes sense to get on the stand to be like, I didn't shoot, someone else did, because
Yeah.
it's highly unlikely that someone else is going to come in and volunteer that they were the shooter.
Yeah.
So again,
I have
like,
clients
who
tell
else?
me someone's going to do that, but you'd be
Right.
surprised. They don't actually show up. Somebody doesn't want to come in and commit a felony, admit to committing a felony to save you from it.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so then moving along, that was one of the big questions people had kind of as this case is concluding. And then the next thing I wanted to dive into were the verdict sheets, which both sides submitted some proposed sheets. And let me see if I can grab it actually, because all right, so the defense's sheet that they submitted was really simple, specifically for count one, which is the racketeering conspiracy. And it says, how did you find the defendant not guilty? And then if you answered not guilty as to count one, proceed to count two. If you answered guilty, which racketeering acts do you unanimously find the defendant agreed would be committed? And then there's just a line open here. See, before we dive into what your thoughts on if this is a good idea or bad idea, we should start with racketeering conspiracy and the fact that that is the first charge or count that Diddy is facing, and the understanding or what is required for that charge. Okay, now I'm going to talk, but also feel free to interrupt, okay? There has to be the existence of an enterprise. Enterprise can be like legal business entity enterprise, but also could be this group of people are literally friends and have agreed with each other to do these things. So it doesn't have to be like actual legal entity, but it also can be, right?
Yeah.
And so there's the existence of this group of people who agree with each other to commit crimes for the sake of, right? And the sake of is shared, right? Like we all are doing this with the understanding that it's for the sake of.
Mm-hmm.
And then the crimes that this group of people, one or more members of this enterprise, they have to commit at least 2 crimes, which becomes a pattern within a 10-year period. The other words,
Yes.
right? Okay.
They're like underlying things, just like, you shot somebody is an element of murder. You kind of have to think about it that way, right? Like, but that's not enough. You have mens rea and all that.
Okay. And so for this case, the prosecutors are saying Diddy and his enterprise committed these crimes. And so, it's a RICO, and within this RICO, they committed all of these acts, criminal activities, racketeering activities. And there has to be a minimum of 2 that the jurors have to believe. But I hate when the balloons happen. Has to be a minimum of 2. But what the prosecutors were alleging is that they did more than just 2. They did a number of them.
Yeah.
And so this line here,
that's why it makes no sense,
was for the jurors to fill in which activities this group of people committed in a 10-year period, but like with no guidance.
So I think what the defense is trying to do is get the jury to like, oh, well, maybe they think he did the arson, but that's only one and that's not enough. So I think they're like thinking they're being sneaky, maybe. But I just think any type of form where there's like a fill in the blank is a bad idea. It's a
recipe for disaster.
Yeah. At the very least, they should have listed, like, if you want it to be that way, they should have done like check boxes. Anytime you ask someone to fill it in,
it's a bad idea.
You're asking for trouble.
I will say even as much or as little, one could argue, that I understand. I was like, if you gave me that, I would be having to remember and think about, well, which ones were supposed to
What are my options?
What are my options that I even have to fill this in? So it definitely just felt so confusing. And then versus the government sheet, which I thought was way
it's a
clearer.
Karen Reed flip-flop situation, you know?
Let me pull up the government sheet, which lays out definitely more clearly. So they have the question as number one, how do you define him with respect to racketeering? But then they have these sub options A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, where they list the actual acts that they are saying the group committed, which I found to be really helpful. And as someone who's been kind of following the case, after going through them, I was like, oh, I don't think that they actually proved some of these either. So I'll start with actually, before I do that, I'd love to get your thoughts from what you know, both of you, about racketeering being a charge in this case. Does it feel like a lot of the discussion has been he's been overcharged, there is no RICO? Thoughts and opinions?
I mean, ultimately, everything about this case to me is much more of a philosophical question than a legal question, right? Because I do think that they have probably proven enough to make 2 of these. But the question here, and it's not dissimilar from YSL, although YSL was considerably stupider, is this really what, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, is this really what the statute was intended to govern? I think that's really the question that a juror is more likely to struggle with than do we think he did some of these things? Okay. Like, you know, because we all have RICO things in our head, like even me as a lawyer, like that means something to me that legally it really doesn't, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, that to me is kind of like the bigger question is like, do you think this is actually the appropriate charge for this? Because like when I first started paying attention to YSL, I was like, well, if they think that, you know, so-and-so murdered somebody, why didn't they just charge him with murder? Right. Yeah. What it really is like a backdoor to allow in so much things that would otherwise be 404B evidence, more prejudicial than probative, other bad acts, to, you know, illustrate the breadth of this conspiracy and, you know, all of that. It's like, ultimately, this is like Diddy is a real POS, and some of the ways in which he's a POS violate statutes. So it's like, I don't not understand, you know, why we're here, but I also am like, you know, I was in a live right before this where people were like, these are a lot of state charges. And it's like, I don't disagree that like a lot of this is better suited as a state charge. It kind of begs the question to me, like, why did the feds devote so many resources to this? Because are they really just that obsessed with the idea that Diddy not get away with like other bad acts? You know, like it's kind of a, like, I don't want to come across as though I'm defending Diddy because I do think he's an absolutely horrific human being. But at the same time, it's just like, it's a weird thing. And, you know, like in my head too, conspiracy, the idea is like, we're all coming together to do a bad act. And most of the people that are otherwise engaged in this conspiracy are like committed to committing the act, but it's not because like we all want to do crime and make money off of it, because that's really not what it was. Yeah. You know, like, do I think that technically Diddy's conduct meets the elements of a lot of this? Yes. Do I necessarily think this is actually where this should be? Maybe not.
Okay.
Yeah, Hallie? I don't, I mean, he's a horrific, horrible person, but like, I think we should all cancel his music and never listen to him again. But I don't think he's committed a crime that he's been accused. I mean, do I think he had someone set fire? Was it Kid Cudi's car?
Yeah. He took that out, right?
Absolutely he did. But like, first of all, they didn't prove it. And was it as part of a conspiracy to further the Sean Diddy Combs enterprise? Or was it because he's an angry ex-boyfriend? Like,
and a freak.
Because he's a fucking jerk. Like, you know, I don't think that it, like, because again, how does that, it's one of those things that we always talk about, like, when you represent people who have been committed, you know, who have previously committed felonies. And so, like, it's illegal to do certain things if you have a felony conviction in your background. And it's like, the problem with this RICO Act is like once they say that you're a part of this group, it's almost like, oh, well, they jaywalked and they're in a gang, so that's like, it's just ridiculous. And I don't, and again, like, you know, it's not televised, we can't watch, but based on what I've seen, I mean, don't come for me Too movement, but like, I'm not convinced that Cassie was not a willing participant in all of this. Like, and I'm just not, and even if she wasn't, I think maybe it's just sex trafficking and it's not a RICO. Like, how does Sean Diddy Combs Enterprise benefit from the sex trafficking? No, he benefits because he's a weirdo that is into gross, like, gets off on treating women horribly.
As you would say in your videos, Mel, he was stimulated. I don't want to sound like I'm making light of any of this.
Right. Yeah.
But at the same time.
Well, and also, I have a really hard time with, like, the lawsuit, you know, like, she had financial incentive to pursue this. Like, that's the hard thing when anybody's a celebrity. But, you know, I mean, like what Stara said, you know, they took Harvey Weinstein down by charging him with the actual things that he did, not with a RICO. And it's like,
you could argue a RICO for him too.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he used his power as the head of movie studios to further his predilection for, you know, victimizing women, but that doesn't mean it was a RICO. It means he's a sexual predator. And to me, that's what I have a really hard time with this. But like Stara said, that, I mean, the reason they do it is because when it is a RICO, all of the other stuff comes in. And like the RICO statute, when it was written to take down like the mob. And like, you know, these people who are like, I have a dry cleaner, but we use it as a front to launder our money and commit, you know, do all these horrible things, because it's the whole idea that, like, you know, in Illinois we have, what is it? Oh, solicitation of murder for hire. Like, if I pay someone to kill my husband, I didn't kill him, but you know, it's still a crime. It's sort of the same idea that, like, you need a legal mechanism to go after the mob boss who's sitting there making money and having all his minions do his dirty work. Yeah. In addition to getting the minions on the dirty work. But like, I just don't, that's not what happened here. Like, it's just, I think it's a stretch of what the statute is meant to prove. And I don't think that they've proven it, but honestly, the jury could just be so disgusted by his behavior and who he is as a person that I mean, if I was a juror and everybody else felt that way, I'd probably go, I wouldn't be a holdout for this guy. Like, you know?
Yeah. Well, and like, to the extent that I think that, like, they probably have proven a RICO is like how many people were involved in this and how many people, like, because forced labor is a part of this. And there's certainly, you know, literally today I drove 2 hours in my car and just listened to you talk for 2 hours so that I could, like,
sorry.
It was a horrific, traumatic experience. I'm going to be suing you. But, you know, when you hear it all at once with, like, how many people were forced into situations they didn't want to be, I think that's the way you get there. And so it's like a very delicate thing to talk about, because I don't want to make it seem like I don't think this is a big deal or that it shouldn't be prosecuted. And I saw somebody ask about statute of limitations. Like, that's probably why we're not in state court for a lot of this stuff. And, you know, because also it's like, you could have, like, probably based on whatever was the result of the search warrant, charge him with some kind of, like, singular drug conspiracy of some sort, which maybe would have made more sense. And, you know, my opinion on Cassie is, like, a little bit different, maybe. And I don't want to, like, twist Hallie's words. I do think that, like, yes, she was a willing participant in some of this, but I also don't think that she was in all of it. And, like, that's why they had that domestic violence expert. And, like, you have to understand coercive control. But also, to the extent that she was coerced to do any of these things, it also requires you to think about, what did he think of her responses to him? And, you know, because there's a lot of text messages between her and him, where he's like, let's do a freak off. And this is, like, throughout the course of the whole thing. And she's like, no. And then she's yes. And it puts a lot of like the domestic violence thought process in a legal context that is maybe not appropriate for.
Interesting. I will break just quickly because Erian is here. Hello.
Hi. Long time no see.
I know, right? It feels like it's been forever.
It has.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Since you're new to my channel and the podcast, I'd love if you could introduce yourself, and then I kind of catch you up to speed, kind of where we are.
Sure, no problem. First of all, thank you so much, Mel. I appreciate the invite.
Of course.
Let me practice looking at the camera and not at my screen. Okay, so my name is Erian, Erian White. I am a criminal defense, civil rights and personal injury attorney in Miami, Florida, owner of what, can y'all see it? No, I'm already too low. White House Law Group, former public defender, and all around freedom fighter, blacktivist, whatever you'd like to call it.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, and for joining. We were diving into a little bit of Diddy, talking about the RICO charge that, of course, he is facing, and kind of what the understanding of RICO is, if this feels like an appropriate charge for him. One thing, so I would love to get your thoughts on that, but one thing I wanted to add, even for you to comment on as well, and one of the questions that I have had about the RICO charge and in listening to some of the witnesses is, and I think I heard another attorney say it, if I am an employee and you as my boss tell me to do something, does that constitute, is that an agreement that is how it's defined in RICO, right? Like, because there has to be, in my understanding, there has to be an agreement of the members of this enterprise to participate in these criminal activities, in support of and furtherance of whatever. And so if I work for you as an assistant, and even though I'm your business assistant, sometimes you have me doing personal things, and some of those personal things involve me setting up the freak off hotel room, is that me joining in the agreement? And so is that the RICO? And that's where I was like having questions.
Good luck, Erian. This is a tough one.
Yeah, this is a
sorry.
It is tough, but it's not. It is, but it's not, right?
Okay,
so
okay.
The very lawyer answer is that it really depends. It depends, right? So in general, in a conspiracy, each act doesn't have to be illegal, right? So you can agree to do something that's not illegal, theoretically, that is still a part of the conspiracy. And I always go back to the YSL trial and Young Thug getting the car to rent that was driven. Nothing illegal about that, right?
Yeah.
But according to the government, it was a part of a larger conspiracy to cover up. Can we say the M word here?
Sure.
Can we? Okay. The
hard to remember, but
murder word. To cover up a murder, right? So in theory, yes, right? You don't have to be doing something illegal to be a part of a conspiracy and to agree with a conspiracy. But the question that you asked actually kind of relates to one of the biggest things that I'm struggling with this case. And it's that generally when we think about a RICO and we think about like these organizations or empires or whatever we want to call them, enterprises that are a part of these RICOs, we think about organizations that were created for the purpose of committing the crime. That's not what we have here. We have a man who is a very long, though, there's some issues outside of the RICO related to like agreements and contracts with people. But this is not a criminal organization. And so, like you said, there are people that work for him that are just employed that are asked to do these things. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say it doesn't matter what or who it's for. If you agree to commit a crime, right? So somebody that works for him that is agreeing to go buy drugs, we don't even have to have a conversation about that. But if you are working as an employee for your employer and they ask you to go rent a room, theoretically speaking, you may or may not know what was going on inside of that room, even if you rent it once a month for, there are very important and powerful people that do things like this that are not crimes, right? That might just be having an affair, or something that is not criminal. So I don't know that there's a straight answer to that question. I do think there's a line that has to be crossed. And I think anyone on the side of I didn't do anything illegal and I work for this person has a huge, great defense and great argument that they are not a part of a conspiracy and they were just employed. And you're going to have to be able to establish some significant knowledge and willingness to be involved outside of just I work for this person.
Yeah.
Because I don't think everybody that works for him knows what's going on.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that was actually made
clear, you know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think some of the testimony from the assistants made clear that they were not fully aware. But then I think we have never seen KK, and that's the person who, if anybody seems to know what was going on, she seems to know, and the woman is nowhere to be found.
Yeah, I agree.
I was going to ask, something you just said brought a question to my brain. I should write them down, which was, if you're not in agreement. Oh, I know. A lot of people have been reacting to Rico being in agreement with X person, B person. This case is against Diddy and Diddy alone. So what are your thoughts on, that's what I understand. If that's wrong, please correct it. But what are your thoughts on Diddy being the only one charged, and how is that illustrating a Rico if he's the only person?
I hate to say it, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They can choose to charge whoever they want, right? They may have chosen. So for all intents and purposes, Cassie is also a part of this conspiracy. And as much as she is a victim in some of the aspects of it, she's also an active co-conspirator as well. They decided to use her as a witness and as a victim alone. But she could absolutely be subject based on her own testimony. I'm sure she already has, immunity and et cetera, related to the things that she said that were also crimes, because she confessed to crimes on the stand as well. But yeah, they don't have to. And that's the sucky part about stuff like this. There are, I'm sure, 100 people less powerful but equally responsible for what is going on.
I mean, I think, wasn't that the defense's whole Rule 29 motion? Like, who did he conspire with?
Yeah.
And it's not, I am sure that they'll have an instruction that says, like, don't worry about who else is or isn't charged, only worry about what's in front of you. But I think that is a big part of the defense is, in order to have a conspiracy, you have to have people agreeing to do things. And that's why, like, the RICO statute is so broad, because, again, it was designed for, like, the mob. It was designed for the guy, when you think of, like, The Sopranos or, a mob family, they're running legitimate businesses. Like Diddy, like Thug. But they may also be doing criminal things. So that's why, like, the question you asked earlier about, like, if I'm an employee and my boss asks me to do something, it's going to depend on what they asked you to do, because that's why these RICO statutes exist, so that you can't hide behind the the veil of, but we actually dry clean clothes here. So it doesn't, it's not my fault if someone's chopping up bodies in the back. Like that's why the statute exists, because that's how that's how money laundering works with, drugs and gangs, and, they have a legit, you saw Breaking Bad, like could all of the car wash employees be part of a RICO? They probably could have been, if they saw large amounts of cash coming in and all of this stuff going on. It just depends on, what they know and what they did with the information.
Yeah. I have a client right now that is, I have a case with her in state court, but she is both a victim and a defendant in a federal trafficking case.
Oh, wow.
Because she, I don't know all the details, but, like what happens a lot with women in trafficking, and this isn't exactly the same, but it's kind of analogous with, like, the other employees and Cassie to some degree, is they start out low ranking people, and as they gather trust, they're allowed to do more and more. And, like, the interesting dynamic with Cassie that you don't have present with a lot of these other people is that she was also in love with the person that's argued to be the head of the conspiracy. And that's where it gets really complicated.
Yeah.
And I think there is to everybody else's point as well. Let me make a distinction first, right? Like with Diddy, I think the way that at least I see it is that Diddy happens to have an organization or a business that allows him to commit crimes, as opposed to him creating an organization to commit crimes, right? Like I think that's the big difference. And I think normal people, and this is part of why people are struggling to see it as a RICO, because for all this is a regular business that kind of allows him to have this kind of power to do this. But I agree also that I think the jury is going to sit and ask those questions, right? Like, why, if this is truly a RICO, why have we not heard about anybody else? I think that's the question that regular people are going to want to know the answer to, even though technically they don't need to charge anybody else. They can only charge him. But real people want to understand why or how. If this was so bad and all these, how is it that he's the only one that should be punished? I do think that's going to be a problem for them in deliberations.
Well, and also it's like, again, when we think about RICO and like, this has nothing to do with money in a lot of ways. Like the only people that monetarily benefited from this are ironically the super low level employees that were kind of paid to participate because they had a legitimate job that had illegitimate aspects to it. It's not like this made Diddy rich, it didn't serve any financial purpose, which again is not a requirement, which we kept talking about with YSL. But when you're talking about how people like conceptualize this, it becomes a real problem for the prosecution.
I want to specifically highlight the act of bribery, right? There is one of the things that is alleged is that after the Intercontinental Hotel incident happened, Diddy violently attacked Cassie. It's caught on camera. He then paid for the footage in exchange for $100,000. And so bribery is what is claimed. And what are your thoughts about that being a part of the RICO? Because what is alleged, what the security guard said on the stand was that KK called him multiple times. Then she came up to the hotel and was like, hey. So about that video, let me get that. And then she put Diddy on the phone to talk to him. And then they arranged for him to come see them. And there's a security guard there and there's KK there. And she's taking photos of IDs. It's a whole situation. What are your thoughts about that being a part of the RICO? Does it still feel like that it's not? It's just people, like he's having people do things. I'm curious your thoughts.
It's not like he didn't bribe somebody, but to what end? Huh?
Say it again.
It's not like he didn't bribe someone, right? But like to what end? What is the arguable RICO purpose, right?
Let me play devil's advocate.
Do it.
Okay. So
I don't think it's a bribery.
I do, but I don't think it's like the bribery that they're saying that it was.
Right. I don't think it's a bribery this is probably the most clear cut, just quid pro quo. Like, look, let me throw you something and you throw. I don't think it's a bribery either. Because what did he? Bribery, I think, requires that there is some sort of punishment or consequence to the person on the other end if they don't comply. So I don't think it's a bribery. But when I think about who this actually protects,
like, what are the elements of bribery?
No, in federal court, it's only bribery if they're a public official, I think.
Right. Well,
a guy at a hotel, that's not bribery. Bribery is like, hey, Senator, here's 10 grand, push my bill through. Like, I, as a private citizen, am allowed to pay another private citizen to do things. Like, that's not a bribe.
That's interesting.
Like, if I go to Nordstrom and buy pants, am I bribing someone? Or
right,
am I
exactly.
Cash.
Exactly. Like, where is the? I mean, it's Diddy, so I don't want to say like where's the use of influence, but literally, where's the use of influence? The person with all the power is the person that has the video
right now.
So this is fascinating.
Yeah, one of the federal crime is bribery of public officials and witnesses. So it's a crime to bribe a public official. It's a crime to bribe a witness in a case. So I guess, are they saying he's
I
a
think
witness?
that's what. Yeah, he's a witness.
I guess he's a witness.
Yeah.
Oh, to the
He would be the person that could authenticate the
Yeah,
video.
he's
Because
absolutely
we don't know if this person watched this live or they're just the keeper of the video, the person who they would need to testify. So I guess theoretically,
No,
but
because
did he interact with Diddy like at some point?
Well, I'll give
Did
you.
it happen?
Here's what happened. Flores was the first security guard who was actually on staff when the incident happened. He was actually there and witnessed it. Yeah, the guy who took the bribe actually clocked on after the incident happened. He came at 2:00, and when he clocked on and KK called, he was just the person at the desk. So he actually hadn't. He wasn't there when it happened. What's unfortunate is that the security guard who took the bribe had no idea that Flores, who actually saw it, recorded on his phone. So it sounds like the actual witness who saw it happen, who was there live, is Flores, but the one who took the bribe just happened to be at the desk when she called, and he was able to low-key profit off of.
What a come up! What a come up!
I mean, I stand on my position that it's a bribery, even if it's not like what I think
it's
like.
Maybe tampering with a witness. There are things there, right?
But
even if it's not a legitimate bribery.
I don't think so, because it's only bribing what was he a witness to? There was no case pending. He wasn't under oath. But
you don't have to have a case pending to be a witness to bribe.
Well, here's something that the defense raised in their Rule 29 when they were arguing why this should be dropped. They said that there was no police involvement in this at all. So there was there was nothing they were trying to.
But is that required? Like, yes. If I shoot Mel right now in front of all of you guys and I offer all of you $1,000 immediately to not talk, have I not done anything illegal? Like, if you accept the bribes, I don't know.
Because I'm more to tampering charges. I have clients all the time. I mean, by this point, this is like the police have arrived and you go to flush, because they're there at that point.
Well, that's usually it's like getting rid of drugs or something.
Right. So but is it actually criminal tampering if there's not yet there's not yet police involvement? That is,
I don't think there is.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but I do think it would be very odd to me that you couldn't charge somebody with bribing a witness before the police are a part of it.
I think we're caught up on the word bribery. Like there is some sort of criminal act.
And this is what we do.
I love it. No, I love it. Okay, and then
go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say that I think as it relates to the RICO, when we consider who Cassie is and what information she has, I think it makes it a little bit easier to tie it into the RICO, right? Like they were in the middle of a freak off, apparently, that there was another person they were actively involved in a freak off, and the person with the most damaging information was about to exit the premises. So I think when you look at it from that perspective, and that they were actively involved in one of the acts, one of the acts engaged in the conspiracy, that I mean, you can connect it. And we saw this with YSL too. Not every act ties back to the larger conspiracy so like succinctly. Not everything is like you can directly point it at how this benefits YSL. Sometimes it's just for the benefit of the individual person, and maybe they are using the power that they have from the overall conspiracy to get the benefit.
I'm looking at the statute. I see Hallie's argument, but it just would be I haven't gone through the whole statute, but it would be very odd to me that you couldn't bribe a witness before the police got called. Like, I don't know. You might not. I'm like, I haven't made it through the whole thing.
I will say I have never had one. I've never had any sort of tampering case where there wasn't already.
It's always they're in jail and they're making calls on a jail phone. Hey, tell Buddy I'll pay him $5,000 if he doesn't show up.
Oh, well, that's interesting because one of the other acts, a part of the RICO, is the tampering with a victim or witness, and it has to do with before charges are announced, before the raid happens. I believe even before the raid happens, one of his bodyguards makes a call to Mia and tells her is trying to get her to talk to Diddy on the phone. And she is like trying to avoid him. She's not trying to have it. And the bodyguard is calling. Then he's offering to give her gifts, trying to get her to talk. And then eventually Diddy calls her himself and she doesn't answer. She says she throws her phone and runs out of her house. How do you guys feel about those?
So I just pulled up the Florida statute to be sure, because though I've never had it happen to me, I would find it like troubling that Florida doesn't have anything to account for this. So one of the sections, it says to alter, destroy, mutilate, or conceal an object with the intent to impair the integrity or availability of the object for use in an official investigation or official proceeding. I think it doesn't explicitly say while it's pending, but I think that can account for, you wanted this gone so that when the police got here, this is a crime. You wanted it gone so that when the police got here, it wasn't available.
It wasn't a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a witness tampering case. I've never had one.
Really?
I've had plenty of them.
Really?
What they doing in Florida?
Plenty of them. It's Florida. They normally, my tampering cases are normally where my client has allegedly called, a victim, or it's mostly a victim, mostly domestic violence cases, where my client is alleged to have called the alleged victim from jail, right? Or had a family member reach out to them from while they were in jail. Those are mostly the ones I get. And then other than that, it's going to be like a drug case where some physical evidence is destroyed in front of the police.
Well, tampering, physical evidence I see all the time. Yeah. But like when it comes to like domestic violence stuff, here we have like the concept of forfeiture by wrongdoing. Deal with that. So like I have clients that, call their girlfriend or whoever all the time to encourage them to maybe, have different thoughts than they initially had. And like basically when they do that and you can prove it, forfeiture by wrongdoing may allow you to get some other like hearsay related stuff at the trial and that kind of thing. Okay. But I've never had them charge anybody with witness tampering.
So I just pulled up, I can't find the Second Circuit pattern instructions online, which is weird, but the Seventh Circuit pattern instruction for witness tampering is the indictment charges the defendant with obstruction of justice. In order for you to find the defendant guilty of this charge, the government must prove each of the three following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Number one, the defendant intimidated, threatened, corruptly persuaded, engaged in misleading conduct toward another person. 2, the defendant acted knowingly. And 3, the defendant acted with the intent to influence, delay, or prevent the testimony of any person in an official proceeding.
Okay.
And that sounds like tampering.
Yeah. Right? Who is committing a crime and before they get caught, not trying to avoid getting caught? Right. Everybody should be charged with witness tampering, or it's just kind of a part of the process.
Right.
Yeah. Nobody wants to get caught.
No.
So
well, it's just like there's a school of thought. Like I think in like Norwegian countries, like you can't be charged with escape because that's the most natural human instinct.
You know where I stand on this, Stara.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like. I'm not endorsing witness tampering. I'm just saying you have to prove it if you're going to allege it.
I agree.
Hilarious. Okay, so then we can move on, I think, from the RICO. I think we covered a ton of it. It was interesting because, again, they removed some of the acts from that. So the pathway to the guilty has just been narrowed, but it still exists. The RICO is still there, and they still have other things that they can say the government proved in order to establish that, the RICO has been proven.
If you don't mind,
please.
I had a friend who's also a lawyer, but does not touch anything criminal related. He was concerned about what the jury will now think that these acts have been removed, right?
Mm.
And whether or not this could like cause a mistrial or, that sort of thing. And I think it is interesting because my answer to him ultimately was like, well, it boils down to whether or not this was all done in good faith, right? And it's just not really something we can establish. Like if the government put this stuff in front of the jury just to throw everything they can, knowing that they couldn't prove it, then there's like arguments to be made. The problem is good faith is like it's like toilet tissue on the wall. You can't, how do you prove that?
Yeah.
But I did find that interesting that as we go to the jury, the defense they put on, it's not like the defense dropped the bombshell that, disproved any of this stuff. They just kind of said, we'll just let these go. And I do find that really interesting because the jury, as much as we like to say, you can't, discuss this, you can't figure that, please. Like once they hear it, they heard it. And that's just the sad truth. So
yeah, I will say as obviously I've read all the lawsuits regarding this case and the lawsuits before this case, I should say. I am of the belief, and I can be stoned later for it, that man absolutely had Kid Cudi's car blown up. Absolutely, that without a doubt. However, they did not prove it, and they did not prove when the officer who is the investigator for the case says that it's an open investigation and that the fingerprints came back to a female. I mean, and then the kidnapping for Capricorn Clark, I didn't get to see her in person, but I read the transcripts and she just did not come across very credible. I think that they did a good job on cross-examination. They did a great job. And so at the end of it, and to be honest, after hearing her or reading her testimony, I had to say, wait, when was the kidnapping? When did the kidnapping happen? So it took me a minute to register what the kidnapping claim was. So
and I'm not defending the allegation of kidnapping. It doesn't take really all that much to be kidnapping, Right. Like Bob's upstairs right now. Well, if I pull out a gun and force him into his bathroom,
that's kidnapping.
You could argue I kidnapped him. I'm not going to do that because he has way more guns than I do. But
I agree. I think that train of thought, Mel, is exact. I like to think like the jurors think, and I think the government is going to have a huge problem when these people discuss it. I hope we later hear what they discuss, but I think there's going to be a lot of like, and this sounded really like fantastical when they said it in opening, and then it fell flat, during the testimony. I found it very interesting that a lot of the rumors that we heard like over the years turned out to be things that are actually like I heard about that whole Kid Cudi thing maybe a couple years ago when there was some incident. They were saying that Lord, please, that he hung Wale over a balcony or something. There was like some kind of crazy rumor. And then people started talking about the Kid Cudi car thing. So I find it interesting that a lot of stuff that's made it to our ears without police involvement, like we're seeing it play out in front of this jury. And some of it still sounds like rumors. Even now.
Well, I mean, like the whole section of testimony, this is kind of where I ended up like not being able to finish all of your videos. It's like the Suge Knight thing, it's like there's a lot of different accounts, and I have no doubt in my mind that Diddy was like doing something in that situation. But do I have a doubt in my mind as to what it specifically was? Yes. And I know he's not like specifically charged with that, but it's sort of like is an exemplar of kind of the problem with a lot of these allegations.
Interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just looking at the jury, like the proposed verdict sheet again, and it's like there are so many ways they could get there. Like, it seems to me like, tampering with a witness or victim. Sounds like that happened.
Yeah.
Forced labor. Sounds like that maybe happened.
Yeah.
prostitution. Sounds like that happened. Like that's 3 acts. You're there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is one of those that like there are cases where as the jury goes out to deliberate, you're thinking like, well, if they come back my way, I won't be shocked. Right. But if they, like neither verdict will shock me. If the jury is like, they didn't prove a RICO, I'd be like, yeah, I get it. But if they came back and they're like, yeah, they did, and here's the ones, I'd be like, yeah, I get that too.
Yeah.
Like,
100%. That's why at the start of this, I said that to me, it's kind of more of a philosophical question than a legal question in a certain sense, Yeah.
Yeah. I could also see the jury saying, yeah, I think he committed a lot of these crimes. I just don't think that these are we don't talk about jury nullification as much as I want to like scream into the mountaintops on all my videos just so everybody knows that I don't have to sit in a courtroom. But people are not access to content related to the law, specifically criminal law, makes me believe that a lot more people know about jury nullification, than 2 years ago even. And it would not surprise me.
And I agree with that, but I don't think this is a nullification case.
Oh no, I agree. I agree.
Because his act, like that's what I was saying before you got on here, Erian. Like, no one, if I were on this jury and I walked back there and I was like, everybody thinks he did a RICO except for me, I'm not gonna fucking hold out for this. Like, okay, that's the one where I'm going to listen to everyone else. And if 11 of y'all agree, okay, like I'm not holding out for the guy who is clearly a horrible human being.
I am way too controlling to ever do that. I would absolutely be holding out forever.
Really?
It's not about Diddy. It's about me.
I'm saying in this case.
No.
And bear in mind in this scenario, Erian, you're probably not Erian the attorney. You're like,
right. That's true. You're right. You're right.
What I mean? Like, I would absolutely hold out for someone that I felt very strongly had not been proven guilty. I don't feel very strongly one way or the other about Diddy, and I do feel strongly that he's a horrible human being. So I'm not going to hem and haw over like, I'm putting a good man away.
I feel that. I don't think this is a nullification case in like the sense that we all think of it. Like, this is a person who is deserving of freedom, even if they did. I don't think it's one of those, but I can see the jury saying, I don't think this is a RICO. Like, I think they couldn't get him. So they made it RICO, and it's not a RICO. And I'm not willing to find him guilty just because they want to get him. You know what I mean? Like, I can see that.
Well, and to get back to kind of what I said at the beginning, which is that I think I said this here. I was talking to somebody earlier. I think that so much of our perception as to what this case was going to look like is what we thought freak-offs were, which is very different than what they have been shown to be. Yeah. And I think that, like, the jurors don't have to know nothing about any of this, right? Mm-hmm. And so if they came in with that preconceived notion as to, like, freak-offs being this, like, everybody's being forced to do whatever, they're going to be disappointed in the case that they saw.
I agree with that. Did y'all already talk about? Go ahead. No. Sorry,
I was just keep your thought though. I was just gonna say, in hearing what you're saying, my thought has been regular people have less of an understanding of RICO, and I could imagine them getting to if I have to answer yes or no on these 5 things, and my answers are yes, and that means yes to one, yes. I actually imagine there being more discomfort with the sex trafficking allegations specifically against him because of how similarly or how closely they reflect romantic relationships sometimes. In the sense that many times I have a husband, I've been married almost 11 years, and sometimes I know how to get what I want. And so when you present in this kind of case, you mean to tell me that there's some things like
that? Why Greg is not here today?
There's a RICO coming. No, I'm just kidding. But I in my mind, I'm like, are people going to have more of an issue with these sex trafficking claims, allegations versus the RICO, because this is a little close to home, and I'm curious if y'all have thoughts on it.
Okay, I do have thoughts. So me and my husband always make this joke, like, you can't defile the marriage bed, right? Like, whatever you can do, whatever you want to do in the marriage bed. Like, we always joke about that, right? So we actually had this conversation, like,
Tell
Could
me
you
more,
imagine?
Erian.
But no, seriously. So if you think about, we have how many jurors are there? Were there like 12 plus the
I think they had
alternate?
Yeah. I think it's
so 16, I think it was, right?
Well, I think they had 6 extras and they've lost.
They did.
2.
1. Oh, 2. You're right.
Okay, so let's say 16. However, of those 16 people, first and foremost, we have no idea what the, I don't even, sexual theories of, or we don't know what these people are into. We have no idea, and it could range. We literally have no idea. We never have any idea. So the idea that there could be people who are interested in similar, or I don't want to use the word worse because I don't like to kink shame, but worse for all intents and purposes, like we don't know what people could be into, and for people to sit there and be like, "You mean to tell me if my third or fourth or whatever, decides that I'm like," that is scary. So I agree. I think people will sit and possibly be interested in some of the things that Diddy is interested in based on what we saw, and that could be an issue as well. Like, do you mean to tell me that if I have a group of friends that are also interested in this and we do XYZ 1, 2, 3, that I could be
a Rico?
Is this a Rico?
Yeah, I know we didn't see those videos, and I'm curious as to like how horrific they truly look, because I think that will kind of impact what you're getting at as to how they perceive that. But we didn't see it.
What videos were there?
There's freak off videos.
There's recordings. Yeah, he was recording the freak offs.
He recorded them. That was a part of the freak off.
I remember he recorded them, but I didn't realize that the recordings were played.
Yeah. So they were played for the jury, obviously not for the public and the media, but they were played. And actually, like 2 days ago, it was about 40 minutes of the videos that were played, but they have been played and pictures have been shown throughout. And so I was going to say, to counter the point of like, this is a little too close to home, the other part of it is, for me, I will say, sitting in that courtroom, I was there when Jane testified, hearing her describe and the journey you go on with her testimony of how things started and how they ended was a journey. It was a roller coaster. And when you see text messages or hear text messages being read of her saying, "I don't want to do this. I only want to have sex with you." And then, of course, the prosecutors are like, "And did you have sex with just him?" And she's like, "No." "And did you want to have sex with just him?" "Yes." "But did you have," like it's a whole thing. And so I say all of that to say, I do see both sides of this where like, this is close to home, but I also see, well, this might feel a little like coercion and force and fraud because.
Well, and transcripts are so cold,
they are.
Like
and
you experienced part of that, like we weren't there. We didn't.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
To both of those points. So I actually, until Mel and Stara, you just said it, I didn't even realize or think about it, right? We spent months seeing like pictures of all these other famous people in all white, thinking like, oh my God, we're about to hear about all these people being in these freak offs. And it turns out crickets. It wasn't like that at all. I don't know if, it wouldn't be necessarily appropriate for it to be made in that way. But I would hope, like in closing, that is, they painted him out as though he has, he bought a mansion to have these freak offs in, and when it turns out it's actually kind of an intimate thing. And I think they'll be able to kind of paint that distinction. I don't know if it'll be enough, but I think they will be able to paint that distinction because I think everybody, including me, felt that way. The other thing is, I like to consider myself a progressive, woman, right? And I know what I think about consent but I am reading comments in the Shade Room and, all the blogs. And there are a lot of people of the opinion that, coercion or benefit, right? Like, were you coerced or did you do this because you got a benefit? Like maybe you didn't want to do it, but the reason you actually did it, is it because he coerced you to do it, or is it because he had something that you wanted, access, or whatever it might be? So I would not count out the possibility that there will be jurors that think that they don't see this as coercion, even though she's saying, "No, I don't want to."
Yeah.
Well, and keep in mind, like, where is this trial taking place? Manhattan?
Yeah.
There are all sorts of women married to very wealthy men in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And, who maybe they put up with a guy who's an asshole because they get to live in a townhouse on the Upper East Side. Like, there are all sorts of things that women put up with from men and vice versa. Because that's how relationships, people who stay together for the kids. Like, I didn't want to be with this guy at all, but we have kids together and he pays for private school. And, same thing. Like, is it coercion? I didn't want to do it, but I got a benefit out of it. So I stayed with this guy that I don't like because he provides me with a lifestyle that I like. I mean, I can certainly see a juror having that reaction to it.
Yeah.
Well, and the tough thing about that is, from the defense perspective, is how to like thread the needle of that argument where you don't verge into offensive territory. That's hard. That's very really hard.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Go ahead, please.
No, I'm just gonna say I agree from both sides. I hate making both sides arguments. That's why I'm like, let me be devil's advocate.
Well, I mean,
I agree on the other side
here.
Yeah, like with the state, I think it would be or the government, in this case, the federal government. I think it would be foolish. I would hope anybody who is putting on a case or defending a case is looking at it from both sides. But I think if the government is thinking that they're just going to be able to make the argument that it was coercion because they said they didn't want to do it and then they ended up doing it, like the way they lay out the direct examination, well, you didn't want to do it, right? But then you did it, right? And it was with him, and I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's enough in a case like this. So,
yeah. Go ahead.
Well, to that point, like I was re-listening to your videos this morning, Mel, and like there were a couple of lines from Cassie that were just like written for closing argument for the prosecution about her experience, and I'm sure we're gonna.
That's my therapist. That was one.
Well, Cassie and Jane, honestly, like for Cassie, there were things for sure they're gonna call on, but for Jane, what the difference and the interesting thing in my perspective is that Jane was older, right, when she got with Diddy. Cassie was 19 and she was signed to a 10-year album deal, and he controlled her music career and her ability to do other things, and he controlled everything. And so, and then she's also watching this violence that he is inflicting not only on just her, but other people, right? And so that's a part of the coercion that they're arguing is like, you better get some act right or you gon' experience this.
Yeah.
For Jane, what was so interesting is there were text messages in which she literally said, I feel manipulated and I feel lied to by you. And that was key because the way that they are alleging Diddy trafficked her was through fraud. And so when she is outright saying in text messages 2 years ago, I feel like you are tricking me and you are manipulating me and you are getting me to agree because you know I want X. Right. And so when you're able to paint that picture and do it very clearly with those messages, I think that will be interesting. But the other thing I wanted to say is it is a very, very diverse jury. I walked in there and my mouth dropped because I said, how did y'all get this makeup? It is young and old men. And I think there's 3 Black women. And there are every race on this jury. I mean, it is very diverse. And I was in there when they played some of the videos. And what I will say is that one of the people turned their body like this, right? If this is my monitor with the visuals, like this, like not watching at one point.
Another just like disgusted.
Yes. Another juror, it was a man. I need my glasses because he said, I said, now wait a minute.
I mean, my YSL googly eyes, which just happened to be right here.
Funny.
Now what is happening? But some of them are, there's an older woman. Am I allowed to be saying this?
Yeah. Yeah. The makeup of the
an older woman who is just kind of like, she looking, but she don't want to look. So I think it's going to, I would love to get insight into the conversations, because they just look so different on this jury. And so what does that mean? And what are their life experiences that are going to give them, the lens of the, yes, this feels like coercion, or no, she wanted the money, or, I think that's going to be so fascinating.
I can see this one being hung, because they're like, it's, and again, like I was saying earlier, like if I'm on the jury, I don't have strong feel, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like most cases where I'm like, he did it, this is bullshit, whatever. Like, this is a case where it's like, I don't know, what do y'all think? And if everybody goes back there and is like, I don't know, what do you think? Like,
you go first.
Right.
Like, let me piggyback of what you think.
Right. Like, I can see discussions like that taking place where everybody's kind of waiting for and based on like my conversation with jurors and people who have had jury duty, is I think that's how jury deliberations generally go. Like, everybody goes in the back and they kind of sit around and they wait for someone to be like, okay, we all know he did it, or like, whatever. And then everyone's like, oh, thank God you said so. Okay, totally agree. But it's, I can see this one being like, or people not wanting to admit that they feel a certain way about, hey, I think Cassie deserved everything she got. Like, because I could think that, but I know that I shouldn't say that. And now I'm with the people that I've been eating lunch with for the last 5 weeks. And you want me to admit that I'm kind of a shitty person. Like, like there's just a lot of like, and truly with any type of sex case, these issues come up. I have more than most people do sex cases, but a lot of times in sex cases, it's a consent issue. It's, the man, we were both drunk. I thought we both wanted it. Turns out she didn't, and so
the stranger cases get resolved via a plea bargain.
Right.
It's the ones, Yeah,
because in that case, it's like, that's, but like, juries are very hesitant to, I feel like I've seen a lot of cases of like drunk college students. They are very hesitant, even in the Me Too times. Again, and I think this kind of came up earlier when Stara was talking about like the way someone perceives it. Like, maybe she didn't want it, but if she didn't explicitly say no, how was he supposed to know that? And I think jurors are thinking that when they're going back and deliberating in those. Like, I know we're supposed to believe women, and I don't doubt that she regretted it the next, like, people are having thoughts that they may not be thrilled to share, but in a jury room, they're going to color the way you see something. Yeah. And I think that that's going to happen here.
And speaking as a woman and not an attorney in this context, I want to believe women too. But I know from very real personal experience that women lie about stuff like this all the time. And it's like a horrible, you don't want to have to say it, but I'm like, I see women lying about shit constantly. And that, like, given my personal work experience, and I'm sure they share this too, it's like, I can't pretend like I haven't seen things that I've seen. And we don't know where these jurors are going to come from on that, And
I always say that, like, I have every intention. Like, I believe women. I want to believe women. I am a woman. That's where I am. But I'm also like a person with a brain, and I have a right to ask questions and consider the alternative. And what I think in conversation, I tell people this all the time, is very different than what I think when I'm inside of a courtroom, right? Generally, I believe women, but I'm allowed to say what is this person's credibility? And when we talk about credibility, I actually think Cassie has a lot of credibility.
Yeah,
she has a lot of credibility. So this is not like a direct conversation about Cassie, just about.
I want to be clear. That's not what I was saying.
I think Cassie is super duper credible. But credible or not, right? And this is just the reality. there will be people that question her credibility no matter how much evidence and proof she has. And part of that is because of all of the benefits that she was able to
see that's where I'm at on that. Like, yeah. I agree she's credible, but I also think she got an amazing benefit, and that is very different than, you know, a relationship. In most
cases, right? And I think that's probably the better conversation to have, right? Like, she is not like most victims, and it's just a hard conversation to have because powerful men are able to get away with this because of victims like Cassie, right? Where they're getting a financial benefit, they're able to fly on the jets, they're able to like take pictures on the red carpet, so it's not as bad as a regular person.
That's where my whole problem with this case comes from, and I know I keep talking about him, but like Harvey Weinstein, we all agree that that man is a fucking monster and bury him under the jail.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a RICO. Like, he was just a guy who did really terrible things. Like, and that's where I struggle with this, because to me, it feels like the government is cutting corners because they couldn't get him like they got Harvey. And why are we doing that to a black man?
Well,
like, I don't like the optics, you know, like we don't do that to white men.
I do want to push back a little bit on some of this because here's the issue for me. Yes, her benefits were considerably better than other people, but in a lot of ways, her downside was so much fucking worse because this is one of the most powerful men in the world. You feel like you can't leave your shitty husband. Imagine knowing that the person you're going to leave, literally, let's be real, fucking has killed people. Okay. Like, whether he directed it or not, you will not convince me that this man has not been a part of something like that. That is a counterbalance, you know?
I agree. I think that's what I mean. Like, by her, this is not your run-of-the-mill sort of case. She's not your run-of-the-mill victim. But no matter where you stand personally, like, I know where I stand. I think Cassie's a victim, point blank, period. I think that he weaponized his power and his money and his influence to continue to victimize her over a significant amount of time, 10 plus years.
Yeah.
Flat out, point blank, period. But people have legitimate questions that not only they should be asking these questions, right? Because if we're not able to ask these questions in this scenario where we're in a court of law, what are we actually doing? I think these questions are ones that I don't know that the government can really answer for, but I also don't know if they have to, because like I said, I think there's a couple of other things that we can probably get to. We can probably get to RICO on a couple other things, even if we just completely discount that.
The other thing I just wanted to add to this, because the government, in addition to making some changes to the predicate acts under the RICO, they also asked for some other instructions to be added. And one of the things that they really kind of hit on, as to what Hallie was saying, is that payment is not determinative. And they call it out specifically for the trafficking, but also for forced labor. And so what they say essentially is for Mia and Capricorn Clark, who were salaried employees, just because you are salaried does not take away, or does not mean you can't also be forced. You can also be a victim of forced labor. And so in the instance of Cassie, and even for Jane, they call out specifically, if Jane is being given $10,000 a month, that doesn't mean that she can't also be a victim of sex trafficking. She can and so one of the things that they start with, one of the instructions they start with wanting to be added to the instructions for the jury is that, and let me call it, say it, earlier consent is not determinative either, right? And so if Cassie and Jane at the beginning of their, love story with Diddy understand that, hey, this is what he likes and I'm down, that yes on March 1st doesn't mean that it extends to March 31st, right, or April 1st. And it's not forever. And so just because, and I to the point that you're making, because I think a lot of people, these are the conversations, right? And the purpose of this, even this conversation, for everyone who is probably going to have all the comments in the comment, I want to say, the reality is these are conversations that the jurors are probably going to be having because people feel different ways. They have different life experiences and they see things differently. And so this is what will come up. That is the point and the sake, and to get insight from attorneys. That is the point. But I say all of that to say a lot of people will feel like that. A lot of people are going to be like, she had a record deal and she was in the studio with Nicki Minaj and she got her house paid. So I don't understand. But I think the other side of that, and the reality is, yes, you paid my rent, but that don't mean you can traffic me. That don't mean you can force me to do things that I am not consenting to. And that is basically the basis for the government's claim, their case here. So anyway, I just wanted to add that because they did address it in this document, which I thought was interesting. It'll be, I haven't seen yet what the judge rules on it, but the government is asking for those things to be added.
I think they have to, right? Because there is so much money involved as far as like being paid back and forth to these people. It's going to be at the top of everybody's mind, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what do you mean forced labor? Like, these people sought him out. I'm thinking of, oh my goodness, who was it? It was the assistant that was texting him, I love you, or, you know, like, I forgot who that was. So when we think about someone like that, right, who is on the one hand claiming, I am a victim of, you know, everything. The only thing he didn't do, no, she said he sexually assaulted her too. I take it back. Everything he did to Cassie, he did to me, right? Except I'm not a singer. I was just working. Those sorts of situations, people are instantly going to be like, girl, stop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why are you commenting under his post that you love him years after you stop working for him? It's because of the money. So they need that kind of instruction to the jury. I always say a jury instruction is either going to empower the jury or like close the door and hamper them from being creative. So they should ask for it.
Yeah, and I see Shawnee Armstrong's comment about what he was paying these people, and I'm like, dude, if you wanted to keep these people, like, you couldn't afford to pay them a little bit more. Like, it boggles the mind. Like,
they were not getting a lot of money.
No, it's just like it's a drop in the bucket.
I'm always shocked at how little people are paid.
My fantasy as a very rich person would be literally to go around leaving giant tips just to watch people receive them. Like, I think that would be awesome. Like,
How long have I been on here? I didn't even realize we could see the chat. Sorry.
I literally just did the same thing. I was like, oh yeah, there are comments.
Sorry, hilarious. Directly to me. Now I see it.
That's funny. Y'all. Yes, the Patreon is in here. I think that was really some of the last things I wanted to hit on was going through those charges, what we kind of the opinions and what you imagine jurors to be asking when it comes to obviously the biggest charges being the RICO and then the trafficking. Yeah. There are different cases when it comes to Jane's story is very different than the story that Cassie has. Again, Cassie was 19 when she met him. He had, in my opinion, a lot of control over her career. He was, 34 when she met him. And it was 11 years of a relationship that involved a lot of drugs. These were addicts, right? They were very clearly addicted to drugs and like all the kinds. And so when you add that part in and then the dynamic that they have and then the money and the resources that he has and what that means for her, it's going to be interesting to see what the jury comes up with for her case. And then of course, Jane being much older, right? She was in her 30s when she met Diddy. And also the way that story came about. She went on a trip with a friend of hers. And while she is on this trip, her friend who dates Diddy, Jane goes to the bathroom and Diddy comes like, what's up? We should exchange numbers. And it's like, you're dating my friend, but also here's my number. And so that also, right? People will develop feelings and opinions about her and who she is and the kind of woman she is simply based off
what her motives are. Like how much did you really not want to do it when you didn't have to involve yourself? You had the best excuse ever. I'm so sorry you're dating my friend. What? Yeah. Why would you do that? And would you be willing to do that if this was a regular guy that you met in a gas station bathroom? I think not.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, his modus operandi is like, he's so good at not just like, oh, I'm Diddy, who wouldn't want a piece of this money, what fame, whatever. It's like he knows how he apparently seems to know how to identify women that would enjoy the idea of creating a distinction between themselves and other women because he's interested. And like, that's a different conversation this indictment, but like, that's why like people like him are able to be successful and desire not only just knowing that they could like bang any chick that comes into the room, but it's about they want it to happen in this disturbed way. And that's why Diddy is so disturbing to me.
Yeah.
Did y'all disclose or not disclose, but did we already have a discussion about who Jane was, or are we just going to continue to call her Jane?
I personally, because I was there for that and was obviously, I mean, I'm not going back, but I was a part of the instruction of, hey, listen, if you're in here, you can't. I prefer to leave it.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to know before I said something, because I see a couple comments that I would like to respond to, but I won't. Sorry, guys.
Prefer to leave that at Jane. But what is worth mentioning, I think, about Jane and what she said on the stand was the defense on cross asked her if at one point she told the government that she is basically only interested in men who can provide for her, and she responded.
And a lot of women feel that way.
You ain't wrong, Jane. You ain't wrong, girl.
Well, I'm very interested in that. Didn't find one, but maybe
the things you don't know about Hallie is that she really wants to be a trad wife.
Like all I want.
No, we all don't want no scrubs, Jane. So I
like nobody wakes up and is like, God, I hope I can meet a man working part-time at minimum wage. My king with no health insurance. Like,
health insurance.
Everybody wants a wealthy man with nice stuff.
Yes.
But I say that because of they were trying to get at her motives, obviously, and trying to paint her in a certain light. And she very much owned it. Like, yes, I have traditionally dated men who are very wealthy and who can protect and provide for me. That's what I'm interested in. So she did.
The way she should answer that question.
Yeah.
Because there's so many, like, not to bring up Karen Reed, but like Officer Dever just like refusing to like acknowledge anything. It's just like, just fucking acknowledge it.
No, there are ways, like, it goes so much worse when you act like a fucking asshole. Than if you just
Dever was stressing me out, okay? I had to take a break.
I'm sorry to bring it up, but like, my lord, like, you know, I saw a lot of people, like, a lot of the discourse tends to be somewhat hyperbolic about things in that case, but like, I've seen so many people that are like, no prosecutor is going to want to put her on the stand. That is absolutely fucking true. Like, if I had a case where I needed her, I'd be like, what can we do?
Else.
Right. Who else saw it?
He's so bad. Oh my God. Anyway, sorry to bring up
It's great. It's great.
I've never seen a worse police witness. My God.
Yeah, that was bad.
I think that was what I had to say. I guess from here, right? Well, that's what I was saying. So we wanted to discuss, obviously, these big cases. These big charges. The fact that their stories are very different. It'll be interesting to see where the jury lands on trafficking for both of them, and also the transportation to engage in prostitution charges. It seems very cut and dry to me. But am I wrong? Am I missing something?
No. Nope. And I looked up the instruction earlier, and it. I have it right here. Like, transportation for prostitution is 2 elements. The defendant knowingly transported the person in interstate commerce, and at the time, the defendant intended that the person would engage in prostitution or sexual activity for which the defendant or any other person identified in the indictment could have been charged with a criminal offense as charged in the indictment. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
And having like people self-identify as escorts and sex workers I think that is what actually, because this could have been a conversation about just people who have similar sexual interests that are meeting it, you know, that could have been the conversation. But once you have people self-identify as sex workers, I think
okay.
I don't think there's a realistic argument against it.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought, but I'm not a lawyer, so it's always good.
That one you don't need a JD to figure out.
Yeah, I think that one is.
Okay, so with that, because I've kept you here way longer than I told you I would, I'd love, if you're comfortable, verdict predictions.
Ooh.
5 charges. And let me give the warning again before you all be stoned. Me and y'all get stoned in the comments.
Don't stone me.
Listen, if nothing else is not clear, I want everyone to know that we all, I'm going to speak for us all, agree that Diddy is terrible. Okay? We all agree.
Retweet.
There
As
is
we
no
did
endorsement of Diddy in this room. Okay.
And so this conversation was really about the charges that he is facing, and especially as attorneys who defend people all the time, what their perspectives are, what kind of conversations we think the jurors may have, what you would like. That was the point of it. So please support them, love them. Don't go stone them in the comment. In the comments, that was not the purpose of this conversation. But because this is what we're talking about, I'd love to hear predictions on all 5 counts. RICO, trafficking Cassie, transportation to engage in prostitution for Cassie, and then trafficking and prostitution for Jane. Who wants to start?
Oh Lord. And Hallie's like, what y'all think?
I got it because I agree.
Yeah. Honestly, first, I would not be shocked if we got either guilty on all counts or not guilty on all counts.
Okay.
I would not be shocked.
Okay.
If the jury decided that he should walk away, not because he didn't do anything, but because he didn't do it the way that the government is trying to paint it.
Got it.
I think that for me, I thought Cassie was credible already, but I think that her mom testifying about the
money
payment,
solidified
it. I'm being honest. I think that was like, ooh, yikes. What would be the point of that? Mama has never even seen the video. Mama doesn't even know about, like, why did you need to contact other than to completely terrorize her into submission? So I think, honestly, I think he's probably good. Guilty, absolutely, on the prostitution charges. And there's are there 2 separate ones?
2. One for Jane, one for Cassie.
Yeah. I don't know about Jane. Jane, I don't know about Jane. Jane seems a lot less credible for all the reasons I think we just discussed. The age, the way in which they met. I don't know that people in the courtroom, did they know who she was? Or was she just Jane to everybody? Or was she only Jane to us?
She was Jane to everyone. They only identified her as Jane, and anything that included her actual name, we did not see. They did not show on the screens. No, nothing. Any audio that included her name, we could not hear.
Interesting. So they don't, we know about her baby daddy, but they might not know about her baby daddy. There was no discussion about other relationships with powerful men. So that's interesting.
Didn't they reference his occupation?
They referenced him being wealthy.
Or maybe that was an ex.
They said, she said, the father of your child is wealthy. That's what she said.
I think it'll be a lot easier to discredit Jane. I don't think you can discredit Cassie. But I think it's a lot easier to discredit Jane. So I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure about Jane. But so I think guilty on the prostitution. As it relates to Cassie, I'm not sure about Jane. Okay. I just don't think it was a RICO. But that is my legal mind.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was sitting in there and I was looking at that jury verdict that just says proven or not proven. And if 2 of them are proven, it's a RICO. Like, I think if I'm looking at that, not as a lawyer, I might be able to easily come to the conclusion that this was a RICO. There, I said it.
I think that's totally fair.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is a case where if a jury comes back that way, I'm not going to be like, how? I think that's very reasonable. I personally think not guilty on the RICO. Okay. If I'm Hallie the juror, I'm saying not guilty, count 1, guilty, count 2, 3, 4, 5.
I could see that.
But again, I also don't feel super strongly about it. And if my 11 other jurors was like, Jane loved it, I'd be like, okay. You know, like I
what else, y'all?
talked out of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did y'all discuss this before I was on? What do y'all think about the defense not calling anybody?
We did discuss that.
Okay.
You can,
all right.
Who would they call?
give your
I
opinion.
mean, but that's the problem.
Yeah, who are they gonna call?
That's the problem. Okay, so obviously everybody, we all are legal experts in one way or another in the chat and in the conversation, right? So we know that the defense doesn't have to call anybody, but I'm not gonna lie, if I'm on that jury, I'm like, damn, you couldn't find one person to say you didn't do this, like not one.
But like, how do you prove a negative?
Yeah,
I mean, who would
I
you
know,
call?
but like
Cassie's brother to be like, I think she liked it, like that.
No.
Who would you
But
call?
just like
an expert?
I agree.
Enrico? Like,
but I don't know. It just feels, and it's so crazy to feel this way because I when I'm picking a jury, I spend, if I got 45 minutes, I spend 30 on the fact that I can sit back, cross my leg, paint my nails, and I don't have to do nothing. And y'all cannot hold it against me. But look at me sitting here like, man, you only call one person. One? So I don't know. It just felt, again, they don't have to, they don't need to. And maybe they just felt confident enough in what they did. We don't know what their strategy is, right? They might have had the conversation with Diddy like, look, you are not coming home with not guilties, but here's what I think we can do, right? Like, here's what I think we can minimize. We don't know what the strategy is, but I was just hoping there was somebody.
I mean, my thought on it is, again, though, like, who would they, like, let's say I'm Garagos. There's no such thing as an expert in not trafficking. You know what I mean? Like, there's literally no one to call. Like, I could call Diddy's ex-wife to say he didn't traffic me. Well, that's not relevant.
Which one? The one that he killed?
Oh, God.
But you know what I mean? Like, that's not, none of that is relevant.
I didn't say that.
We all go black and gray at this point.
Oh,
Everyone is
like, I just think there's like, and that's because normally, like, with people who do our job for, you know, my clients don't have billions of dollars. Like, if they did, I could call experts and almost every, you know, I could call firearms experts. I could call, you know, chemists. Who in this, even with all the money that Diddy has, I don't know who I would call on his behalf, because the only, like, nothing is, other people that weren't trafficked are not relevant. Like, I just think there's literally no one to call in a case like this. And it's very different from, like, even like a Karen Reed, where there were lots of people that the defense could call, or even, like, I know we all watched YSL, like, they had lyrics experts, like they had, you know, like, there were experts that I truly, gun to my head, could not think of an expert that I would call. Like,
I agree, though. I also felt like
that's your argument.
Yeah, and like I see somebody in the comments, like, sex addiction psychiatrist, that's a punishment issue. It's really not a defensive issue here. Like, what, I guess, to answer your question, I think I agree with Erian on all of this. I mean, again, though, across the board, not guilty, across the board guilty, I could really see all of them. But
that's a bad thing. I think that's a bad thing. Like, that people can't even say, nope, I would not. I don't think that's a good thing.
I mean, I think the reason that I feel that way isn't so much that they don't have, like, proof on these things. It's more, is this the appropriate forum for this kind of thing? I do want to say one thing that, like, when you were talking, Erian, about Cassie and her mother, I think that one of the more powerful things that I heard Cassie say was, you know, people are like, why didn't you tell your mom? I didn't want to burden her with the knowledge. Yeah. I think that is one of the most heartbreaking things that he took for at least a period of time, her relationship with her mother away from her. I think that was
that.
So
I think he knew that, and that's why he involved the mom and said, if you don't pay, which is crazy. Oh my gosh, I can't even think.
Well, And the
you
pop
understand a
nickname.
billionaire telling somebody who works a regular job that you got to pay me? Like, it's not even about the money. It's only about the control, the power. And I think that if I heard everything that Cassie said, when I hear that, I'm like, oh, he's just like,
how do you not believe that? How do you not believe that?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even mean to interrupt. Did you finish, Star? You went through your...
I mean, I think I agree with Erian, you know, like, I think that despite my like reluctance about like, is this an appropriate use of the statute? I think jurors ultimately are going to be so grossed out by him that I can definitely see a RICO, because I do think that they have proof on their elements.
Yeah.
I didn't see Jane. I only like watched your videos about it. I didn't watch it intently, so I don't really feel like I have a strong opinion on that. I think Cassie could go either way in theory, but I think like the comment I just referenced really to me drives home the idea of how non-consensual this really was.
Yeah.
You know, it's horrible. It's like, I know, like, you know, this is an interesting conversation and a lot of it is sort of intellectual, but like at the end of the day, none of us, I'm sure I speak for everybody, nobody doesn't agree that this is absolutely like sick, twisted, disgusting behavior, and that Diddy is a really sick and disturbed man who is in no way excusable or relatable, you know, like because I've seen some of the comments and I feel like some of the stuff we're saying is being misinterpreted. Let it be known that like this is a legal conversation, and a conversation that like, because we all talk to people all the time with varying perspectives, we know that people look at all of this different ways, and there's a lot of like valid perspectives that you could still not agree with.
Yeah.
So I just want that to be like really clear to everybody, you know, because we joke around, but that's also because we just see so much fucking horrible shit every day.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that. It is what I am trying to get across, what I will probably add in the description. Maybe I'll even make a little pre-video before we go into the conversation, just to give the heads up, because the goal is not to have anyone, any of you guys harassed or stoned in the comments. That's not the point. I appreciate you coming on the platform and giving me any of your time. I appreciate it. I will add wait, Hallie, did you give yours?
I did. Yeah, I said not guilty, RICO, guilty of the other 4.
2 through 5. That's right.
Yeah.
I will give my thoughts. What I have struggled with for the RICO, knowing that I struggle with, these are his employees, so like, did they willingly join into the agreement of? That is the biggest problem I have. That considered, one of the things I've struggled with as well is when someone of this level, with this amount of money, power, and resources, commits acts such as this, what is the appropriate way to handle them? Because the reality is they aren't the worker at Target who only has their $15 an hour paycheck. This man has access to people. And so while Joe Blow can, you know, his version of coercion is going to be different, Diddy, with access to literally just about anyone in America, and we're talking high-powered celebrities, we're talking millions of dollars, the ability to give Carisha Young Miami a TV show, right? When you have the ability and the access to that kind of stuff, your coercion is different. And human nature is, I do want access. Help, give it to me too. And so what I struggle with is there has to be, for me, there has to be a different level there. What is the level up? What is the version of punishing or addressing someone with this amount of money, power, and resources? Because it's just so different than the cashier at Target. And so for me, I'm like, I can see, I not only can I see RICO, I'm kind of with the RICO, because I don't have an assistant to go out and schedule.
Right, I gotta go do it myself.
Hotel. I'm editing my videos. I'm making the scripts. I'm doing the podcast. I don't have an assistant.
You need an assistant, by the way.
Yeah.
But I don't. And
Start
so
up your Rico right now, Melanie.
Can I come do it? I'm so
Yeah, I'll be your Rico.
So the problem is my 24 hours in a day is really just mine, and his is times 7 because he got 7 people to do the stuff for him. And so the appropriate way for me to address that level, I'm kind of with the Rico. That's just me. However,
go ahead.
No, go
Not
ahead.
I was just going to say it's so interesting that you say that because that's kind of the history of Rico and why it now exists, right? Because they couldn't get the mafia and the mob on these individual crimes because they had so much money, so much influence, so much power, and the people that they wanted were not the ones that were doing this stuff. It was the other 7 people that had, so they had to find a way to get them, and that's kind of how Rico was created. But I think technology and crime and the way that it has evolved since the initiation of the original Rico statute, I think there needs to be something else for this kind of situation. I don't know what that is, but the way that we're seeing Rico play out over the last maybe 5 years, maybe 10 even, it's just not it's being weaponized in a way that does not make sense. I think I agree with you. There should be something in the that kind of can encapsulate this sort of thing, but I don't think it's Rico. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and to the extent I've argued, I'm not sure this is the appropriate venue for this. It doesn't mean it's not the appropriate venue to prosecute criminal activity like this. It's really under the umbrella of the RICO statute. There needs to be some changes that create some kind of statute that is more in line with this, But right now, this is what we have, right? And I do think it meets the element.
Yeah. And then regarding Cassie, I'm probably deep in my my womanness right now because I'm stone him, okay? Because she was so young. And when I think about children I know at 19, they're dumb. They're dumb and they don't know anything.
And so, the worst part, they think they do.
And
they don't, and they think they do. They don't know that they don't know.
Yeah.
Yes. And the reality again, is my opinion, but the reality of being exposed to certain things is that it opens your mind to them. And now you find yourself craving them. Now you find yourself exposed to something you hadn't thought of. And you know what? I want some more of that. And so when I see the progression of Cassie at 19 and now she's enjoying freak offs, and so then she's like, I'm horny, let's call up whatever, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did we get here? So I think
you can forget in the moment how bad it feels and remember the good parts,
Yes. So do y'all, I don't know if y'all have been following Naziah Harris, is that it? Naziah Harris out of Okay.
Very little, but I know.
So there is in the preliminary hearing, there were text messages that were read out loud, right? Yeah. And some of the text messages, I'm not gonna, but some of them were Naziah, who was 11, 12 at the time, actively asking, to have sexual encounters. Yes. And I immediately, when I started hearing, I immediately thought of her because there is such a level of manipulation and power that has to be put into place for somebody who is a victim to seek it out. And I realized as I'm watching this preliminary hearing that she was desperate for his attention in the Naziah Harris case. And as young as she was, she realized that the only way to get it was if she appeased him. And that was that was the entire point. That was the point of it, was to make it so that it doesn't look like I'm making her do it because she knows that I want it and she's voluntarily giving it to me. Probably was something that he convinced himself. But Cassie's 19, but the concept is exactly the same. And then you look up and it's 2 years later and everything about your life is amazing with the exception of this little corner of disgusting things that you have to do. And you realize if I walk away, he's going to snatch my entire life away from me. Literally my entire life. There was just a interview with Dylon from the band.
I was like,
oh, you like Dylon?
No, I said Dylan. Who's the best rapper?
Dylan, yes. But he talked about how there was like an incident where, you know, they had a confrontation and Diddy was like, whatever, you can say whatever you want to say. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to just let you say it. I'm not even going to respond. And what's going to happen is I'm so powerful that I'm going to just make sure nobody else ever works with you. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. He said he released like 5 albums. And I'm like, what? You got
albums? This is like Harvey Weinstein all over again.
Right.
You know?
Literally. So yeah. I agree with you, Mel. I like, as a woman, as a human, when I'm outside of the courtroom and I just have on my people person hat, I am like disgusted. I'm completely disgusted, and I can't imagine being like a young girl who already has the goals, the dreams, the ambitions to enter into this world, and I end up with Diddy.
Yeah.
One of the few people that could literally just snap his finger and make it happen.
Yeah.
Like, of course. And you look back and you realize that slowly but surely he's been breaking down every wall that you had.
Yeah.
And now you've convinced yourself that you're enjoying it until one day you don't, and you try to run away and he snatches you on an elevator, like from an elevator, and beats you down the hallway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, it always comes back to that Junior's cheesecake episode of Making the Band. Like, honestly, like, I remember watching it, and I know this sounds like a hokey thing, but I remember watching it and being like, this is not right. And I was probably like 19 or something. And I think everybody at the time viewed this show as like such an opportunity. And I remember watching that and being like, I don't think there's anything I would want to debase myself in the way that he obviously needs for you to do. And that is what he was willing to do on television.
Yeah.
Imagine that man in a room where nobody else is, you know?
100%. Yeah. And then the last thing I'll just say quickly is that even for Jane, it's guilty for me, but let me tell you why. Because while I agree, I know it's I'm okay with that, with people yelling at me. For me, the incident that sticks out the most for me is not even, you know, the ones that happened, the hotel nights that happened throughout the course of time. A year ago, June 18th or 19th, 2024, after the lawsuit's out, after the raid has happened, after he's obviously being criminally investigated, federally investigated. He goes to her house, Jane's house, and it's a little iffy because they get violent and it seems like she started it, and that's like, girl, what's happening? But what she says happened is they were not supposed to have a freak off or a hotel night that night. And after he is violent with her, he takes her phone and calls a escort to the house and tells her, you're not about to ruin my night. And then he gives her an ecstasy pill. And when she says she doesn't want it, he essentially looks at her, gets inches away from her face and says, is this coercion? And then she looks at him, takes the pill, the escort comes, and she has the sex. That incident, while I was like, wait, girl, what happened? The violence with her saying she didn't want to have it. And right after the violence, the hotel night happens. That's when I was like, okay, you might have got me on this one. So that's where it's particularly the incident a year ago, not necessarily their whole progression of their relationship, but a year ago, after they hadn't been having freak offs for a couple months and all this stuff. And then there's violence. And immediately after the violence is get in there and do what I told you.
Yeah.
I started having questions.
Well, and with the videos, like, or the story with Jane, like, what I found was so compelling in a lot of ways as to show what a manipulative person is that his method of introducing the idea of the freak off as though this innocent sex thing, he does it the same way across the board. And it shows you that he understands that each of this is a step in his plan to manipulate and control people. You know, like, he's so fucking awful. Like,
yeah.
I feel bad for like his kids.
Oh my
do.
gosh.
Can you imagine like this coming out?
His mom was in there every single day, and his son, one of the sons were in there at least every day I was there. His son was in there every single day. From my understanding, he's been in there every single day. Those two people show up every single day. The other son showed up one day.
To be there. That's abusive.
I'm like, why would y'all want to hear that? And I mean, I was there for Jane as she's describing stuff, and they just sitting in there listening. I said, okay. Couldn't.
That's crazy to me.
Listen, I can't stand to see my daddy. I can't stand to see his butt crack if he mistakenly I can't imagine.
I know what you
imagine.
Right, like hearing something embarrassing about my father. I'm like sitting here like at the thought. Like
hilarious. Anyway, okay, thank you so much for this conversation. I appreciate you guys being here, doing this, sharing your thoughts. I'm so happy. We will have to do it again, but for now, I'll let you have your Wednesday back. Thanks to everyone watching. Make sure you guys follow them. Give your handles really quick. Stara, start with you.
Attorney Stara, Star with an A on the end.
Hallie.
Okay.
I'm Hallie 51 on Instagram.
Hallie do better.
I know. It's like the same Hallie Bez on TikTok.
Okay, wait, is that all of them? You said them?
She said
Oh, she said them. Okay, sorry. I never know how I'm going to say this. I want to like coin it away, but I am Esquired, E.S.Q.U.I.R.E.D, capital R-E-D for any deltas in the chat, on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube.
I love it. And I'm not a lawyer, but on all the platforms, you can follow me, do all the things, join the Patreon for a good time. And until next time, bye.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks, guys.